Have you ever felt like the odd one out, like you just don't quite fit in? Tony Weaver Jr. not only has felt this way, but he's turned it into his superpower.
When I was a teenager, I attempted to end my own life because I didn't love who I was. I didn't feel like who I was as a person had value.
How does somebody go from such a dark place to becoming an award-winning author and mental health advocate? Let's find out.
My work really centers underrepresented voices. It centers people of color, and it centers Black people, Black characters.
So who is Tony Weaver Jr.? He's the creative force behind the webcomic The Uncommons and the upcoming graphic novel Weirdo. He's also somebody who's not afraid to stand up to online hate and advocate for better representation.
There were a lot of kids that were like me, that were in the dark, struggling conceptually with, how do I love who I am? How do I make space for the things that bring me joy in a world where people tell me that I'm not supposed to have those things, that Black kids don't do those things, that growing up means I have to throw those things away.
This is the Hardcore Self-Help Podcast. I'm your host, Dr. Robert Duff. I hope you'll stick around and listen to this really, really awesome interview with Tony Weaver Jr. In this episode, we're going to talk about things like how Tony's upbringing in Atlanta shaped his creative journey, the powerful story behind his graphic novel Weirdo, practical advice for embracing your unique identity, and also the importance of representation in media and storytelling. Don't forget to subscribe to the podcast wherever you watch or listen. And if you have a question, a topic for the show, or a guest suggestion, shoot me an email to duffthepsych@gmail.com. All that said, let's dive in. All right, everybody, we have another awesome guest for you today. We have Tony Weaver Jr. He's an award-winning author and educator who's making waves through his creative projects and mental health advocacy. He describes himself as Dr. Seuss without the racism in his Instagram bio and is not afraid of confronting some online hate to advocate for better representation. He has an awesome webcomic called The Uncommons that you can read right now, and an upcoming graphic novel called Weirdo that we will talk more about. So, Tony, welcome to the show.
Hello. How are you?
I'm really good. How are you feeling today, just generally?
I mean, it's Monday. It's been a long week already. Already.
Yeah.
But I mean, I feel good. My mind's buzzing with ideas. I feel creatively limber.
That's such a good
grateful
term.
for the fact that I get to be a storyteller.
Creatively limber. Have you used that term before, or did that just come up right now?
No, it just popped up. It just popped up right now. But I feel like that's in my brain now. Like all my creative muscles are like, yeah, I could make something. I could write something.
Awesome. So we had to reschedule this once because you lost your voice at a con last time we were trying to record. Do you remember what con that was?
I was at MomoCon in Atlanta, Georgia, my hometown. MomoCon was the first anime convention that I went to when I was like 14 years old. So to be invited back as a guest was a huge thing for me. And also, my work really centers underrepresented voices. It centers people of color, and it centers Black people, Black characters. So in Atlanta, where, you know, that's where my people are. That's where I'm from. They came out strong, and my voice was not ready, which is wild because I'm a voice actor as well. Like I have a degree in acting. Like I'm trained on how to like keep my instrument in good condition so I can still talk. But man, it was a lot. I wasn't sleeping because I was staying up playing Magic the Gathering in the lobby. It was a whole thing.
You were just too hyped.
Yeah, MomoCon will do that to you.
That's cool. That's awesome. Well, I want to learn more about you. I want to learn more about your projects, what you're passionate about. For people who may not be familiar with you, can you give some context about, you know, you mentioned you grew up in Atlanta, is that correct? Mm-hmm. What was life like for you growing up? And, you know, I know that a lot of your work centers on otherness, about finding your group and your people. So, you know, where in your story do you start to realize that that is a thing, that people are separated by groups, that some are okay, some are not?
So I mean, we're on a psychology podcast, right? You're trained. You're a doctor. You know what you're doing. So I will dive in a way that I hope comes across as vulnerable and not as crass, if that makes sense. Because mental health is something that I really care about. But I think I'll start at kind of what was the inciting incident for me. When I was a teenager, I attempted to end my own life because I didn't love who I was. I didn't feel like who I was as a person had value. So one of the great things about growing up in a place like Atlanta is that there was never a question about if I can do anything because of the color of my skin. I mean, like in Atlanta, they're like, oh, black owned businesses. And I'm like, well, yeah, most of the businesses I go to are black owned. There's a statistic that says that less than 3% of the American teaching workforce consists of black males. Black men are like extremely rare in the education space. And I'm like, all of my male teachers have been black. Mm-hmm. I had absolutely no idea. There were a lot of elements of kind of blackness being limited that I just didn't experience because I grew up in Atlanta. But also what happens kind of on the flip side is that when you get so many people of a culture in one place, sometimes the ideas of that culture start to become really monolithic. So you turn on TV, I think one of the inciting incidents for me, and like this is wild to say, but I mean it 100%. My parents put a TV in my room, mistake, but also thanks. And I woke up one night at like 2:00 in the morning. I couldn't sleep. I turned on the TV and MTV was on back when MTV still played music videos. And the Fall Out Boy's Sugar We're Going Down music video played. And that thing like warped my brain. Like I had never heard anything like that. I didn't know that music could be like that. That was like I felt the synapses fire. Like things went off in my brain. But you go to school and it's like, why do you listen to that white people music? Like that's not... Black kids don't listen to stuff like that. Like even though like black people created rock music, right? But for kids, they're like, nah, we don't really do that. You're kind of weird.
That emo stuff.
Exactly. Like you can't pull up with the Welcome to the Black Parade ringtone and expect not to get roasted. I wish somebody would have told me that before I bought the ringtone. But it's that those kind of experiences led me to a place where I felt like the things that brought me joy were bad things. And as I came out on the other side, my parents got me therapy. I was able to kind of come into a place of my own. And what I found was that there were a lot of kids that were struggling with those same ideas. There were a lot of kids that were like me, that were in the dark, struggling conceptually with how do I love who I am? How do I make space for the things that bring me joy in a world where people tell me that I'm not supposed to have those things, that black kids don't do those things, that growing up means I have to throw those things away. Like you see all these books behind me, all these figures behind me. You know how many times people like, you still play with Pokemon? You still like Pokemon? Or you're still reading those books? You still got your action figures? Those were experiences I navigated a lot. And I try to make space for kids that are navigating those experiences in my writing.
That's great. We're at a really interesting time right now because, you know, the wall behind you, there's manga, there are Pokemon, there's a Miles Morales mask and various figures up at the top and stuff like that. That's not as unusual now as it was maybe 10 years ago or something like that, right? Mm-hmm. So we're coming to a place where that's much cooler. But that wasn't the case, you know, 100%. Probably when you were adolescent.
And what's wild is I felt that way. But some of the schools that I go to, I'm still hearing from kids. They're like, "It ain't as cool as you think it is." I'm still going to the schools where like the anime kids are still the anime kids, mm-hmm. and they still got that one lunch table, and don't nobody else want to sit with them. And I'm like, that's wild to me. The fact that kind of the fact that still exists. I think we're certainly in a place where anime has become more mainstream for the better, in my opinion. Just kind of introducing these stories to a whole nother group of people. And I hope that community continues to grow.
Yeah. So I had a look at I got a galley copy of Weirdo, your upcoming graphic novel. And there were so many cool touches in there. So it's very autobiographical, obviously. Mm-hmm. You're the main character in it. But I noticed like things that have to be directly pulled from your life. Like you were just talking about how all schools have, you know, the anime kids, and there's a scene where you are, I think, running to the office, and there's like your Naruto running. And I can see you backpack Naruto running in school during that time. Was that pretty spot on for you at that time?
100%. I think one of the so Weirdo's a graphic novel memoir. I call it the nerdy kids instruction manual for self-love and self-confidence. And it takes me it takes readers with me through that journey of self-love and learning to accept who I am, from before the bullying started to when it got its worst, through the suicide attempt and the light on the other side. That was really important for me, because I feel like there are some people that would write this book and the kid would just get bullied for the whole book, and they attempt suicide like maybe 80% of the way through the book. And then the last chapter is some like light resolution of like, everything's going to be okay. And then we're done and we leave. We would spend majority of the book in the dark, and it would be this like exercise in how much can I traumatize you by showing what this child is going through. But Weirdo is intended to be a victorious tale. It's intended to be a triumphant tale. And some of the places where I found that triumph were incorporating things from my childhood that to the average reader, they go, oh, this is just a creative device. But I'm like, no, like this is real. Like this is literally what happened. Like in the second chapter of Weirdo, it starts with me in a plant shop with my dad. And I'm begging my dad, like, hey, can I get one, please? Can I get one? And Rita's like, what is he talking about? And my dad's like, fine. And I run to the back of the plant store, and you just see this like display case full of Yu-Gi-Oh cards. And like, I didn't make that up. That's real. At North DeKalb Mall, Market Square in Atlanta, Georgia, there was a plant store. And in the back of the plant store, for no reason, it was just a display case full of Yu-Gi-Oh card singles that the lady that owned the shop also sold, that she would have tournaments in the plant store. And I loved getting to revisit, getting to revisit stuff like that. There's a character named the Moon Man that's loosely based on Kid Cudi, whose debut album "Man on the Moon" was legitimately like life-changing for me. All these experiences are real, and I think that as people read the book, I'm curious to see reactions, because I read. I'm not going to read Goodreads after the book comes out. Before the book comes out, I'm like, yeah, I'll go check. After it comes out, I'm like, that's a space for readers. I'm not looking. But before it comes out, the people that are giving early reviews, I'm like, I want to see what they say. And all the reviews I've seen have been positive. But some of the things one thing that a person said was, they were like, it was really hard for me to read some of the things that the character went through. When I see that, I'm like, I promise I didn't punch it up. I did not make an attempt to really like amplify it to make it more cinematic or like it to make more sense for the story. All of those things are things that legitimately happened to me. And I think it's important to honor that, because there's a kid who's going through something just like that, if not worse, right now. So we got to stare at the difficult stuff a little bit, because if we can recognize it and how that behavior shows up in the young people that we care about, we might be able to stop somebody before they get to the point that I got to.
This episode is brought to you by No CD. Here's a question for you. How do you know when overthinking goes too far? Well, if you're constantly questioning and analyzing every interaction, if you're caught in an endless loop of what ifs, if you feel paralyzed by fears of what might happen, if it's eating up hours of your day and causing you a ton of stress, you might be dealing with more than overthinking. These experiences can be symptoms of obsessive compulsive disorder, or OCD. Because the thing is, there's so much more to OCD than just hand washing or organizing. OCD can manifest in many ways, and sometimes it can be mistaken for anxiety or overthinking. That's because it can look like constant worry, intense fear, and stressful unwanted thoughts playing on repeat, no matter what physical or mental actions you take to make them go away. Understanding what OCD really looks like is important, because there are so many misconceptions about the condition. So although OCD severely affects millions of people, they often don't even realize it. But if you're struggling with similar symptoms, there's hope, because OCD is highly treatable with the right kind of therapy. That means specialized therapy, because other forms of therapy won't work for OCD, even ones like talk therapy. That's why I want to tell you about No CD. No CD provides virtual therapy sessions with licensed therapists trained in specialized treatment designed specifically for OCD, exposure and response prevention therapy, or ERP. They accept many major insurance plans to help make it affordable and provide always-on support between therapy sessions. To learn more about therapy with No CD, go to NoCD, NOCD, and schedule a free 15-minute call with their team. That's nocd.com to learn more and book a free 15-minute call. And as a bonus to you guys, I did a full interview with Patrick McGrath from NoCD. So he talks all about the ERP approach and how NoCD is unique. So check that out on episode 406 of the podcast. All right, let's get back to it. I can totally see that. And yeah, it's very authentic. It doesn't seem like you punched up. If anything, you're speaking very much directly to the reader. And there's a part, when you talk about, your attempt on your life where you just sort of, it's not quite breaking the fourth wall, but you say, hey, this happened. Don't ask me how it happened, but this is real. So I think an autobiography of this type could be very self-indulgent for some people. But for you, there are so many specific things I feel like were just straight from your heart and real examples, like you mentioned, that it just comes off as more authentic as far as I'm concerned.
It was actually a struggle for me to write it in the autobiographical sense because I was raised to be really humble. Like my parents, one of the core things that they stuck with me was, you are not better than anybody else. No matter how talented you are, no matter what you have, you are not better than any other person. So when sitting down and writing this book, even though it's my own story, there were still very prevalent thoughts in my head around, why about me? Why me? Do not put the magnifying glass on yourself any more than you absolutely have to. We're using you as a conduit to get this message out there, but do not ever believe this story is about you, which is why for readers for people that are listening to this before they go get the book, you should totally go get Weirdo. I think it's a great book. Which is why we don't get very far into the book before we introduce a lot of other core cast members. Mm-hmm. We get into the book and it goes from weirdo to weirdos. There are a lot of weird kids, and they're all based on my real life friends and people that I grew up with and people that I had experiences with. There's a moment in the book where they're concerned that their school is going to get shut down, and that's real. I didn't come up with that for dramatic tension at the end of the book. Like that actually happened. And I think that's the thing that I'm really happy about, that I was able to write a story that was about me and honored my experiences, that also brought in my community and the people that I love and the people that molded me in very genuine ways.
Where did the genesis of the idea come from in the first place for this particular project, right? So the ambitious project of doing an autobiographical graphic novel with a message behind it.
I think that in order to write Weirdo, I had to, it's a little poetic. You write Weirdo was his story about self-love and encouraging every kid to tell their own story. I had to learn to love my own story, because it's not as though I was ashamed of the fact that I attempted suicide. It's not as though I was ashamed of any of the things that I went through. It's just contradictory for me. It's contradictory to my kind of ethos and who I am to put myself in the front. So you mentioned the uncommons. I wrote the uncommons before I wrote Weirdo, and there are a lot of elements to my personal story and things I want people to be able to overcome. A lot of dialogue around how you see yourself and how you see others, the visions that you have for yourself, how you have to trust what you see, even when other people might not believe in it or believe in you. Things around parasocial relationships and how relying on other people for outside validation can warp your sense of self and cause you to plant your power outside of you, which is one of the worst places that you want to be in. And I was content to kind of explore all those things metaphorically through characters that weren't myself. But I was traveling the country, public speaking. I was talking to a lot of kids. They were struggling mentally. And after a talk, a woman named Jennifer Gates, who would ultimately end up being my literary agent, came up to me and said, "Have you ever considered writing a book?" And I said, I do write a book. It's called The Uncommons. Mm-hmm. You can read it on Webtoon, and we might do a print run soon. And she said, "Yeah, but I feel like you have another story in you. And if that's how it lands for you, if that's how it feels for you, Here's my card. Please reach out. And I sat and I stared at that card in my 440 square foot studio apartment in Washington, D.C. Like, is there a story that you're not telling? Is there something that you want to say that you haven't yet said? And at the time, I had just met Jerry Kraft, who wrote New Kid. And I had also met Raina Telgemeier at San Diego Comic-Con. And I spoke to them both about, hey, I got this idea. It's kind of inkling. Do you feel like there's a need for this? And they were both super encouraging, super encouraging. And that kind of made me say, well, it'll be a challenge, but I feel like it's a story that's worth telling. And I'm glad that I decided to take on that challenge, because this was pre-COVID. This was pre a lot of the mental health disparity that we're seeing right now. So I'm glad I took that leap.
How are you different now that you've written the book? You know, now that you've written Weirdo compared to when you started it?
I think I'm a much stronger writer. So the Uncommons in the webtoon format, it's different. Like, but before we were on webtoon, what's the word I'm looking for? Before we were on webtoon, we were writing it in 22-page like floppies, like how you would like a traditional comic that you find in a store. And that was the thing. It's like, okay, cool. When we get to webtoon on average are about 50 panels a week. So you take five panels as one page. It's like I'm writing 10 pages a week. And I can kind of go on as long as I want. I can make any chapter about what I want it to be about. But a book kind of in like a traditional, like you hold it in your hand, it's different. It's different. You don't really have like the page count is really important. The structure of the book is really important. And I think that made me grow as a writer a lot. Writing Weirdo helped me fall in love with writing in a way that the Uncommons didn't necessarily, because it imposed more limitations on me. And in those limitations, I thrived. Like kind of in those moments, I was able to get very clear with myself about what is important to be articulated right now. At the beginning, when I pitched Weirdo was supposed to be 80% graphic novel, 20% prose, because there were certain moments where I said, there's no way that I can only do this in images. I need my words. But as I wrote it out, I found ways to articulate those things. And I think those were all major areas of growth for me that show up in the way that I write anything now.
What about as a person? Did you feel like you sort of, completely is the wrong word, but had you already healed from a lot of the stuff that took place that you translated into the book? Or was this a part of healing from that, or coming to understand the things you've been through in a different way?
I think that I'm harder on myself than anybody else is. And I think I'm harder on myself than I would be on any other person. Multiple people have said this. I don't particularly have the person that originated this quote in the front of my mind, so I can't attribute it properly. But there's someone that essentially says, think about the way that you speak to yourself and ask yourself if you would speak to a person that you loved like that. And for me, prior to writing Weirdo, the answer was no. And I founded my organization, Weird Enough Productions, is a national nonprofit rooted focused on improving youth mental health. Started when I was a junior in college. So I was getting 2 degrees, max credit hours, working a job, and starting this company at the same time. There's a lot of pressure on me. I think as early as my sophomore year of college, I started to have anxiety attacks about what happens when I walk across that stage. What does graduation look like? And I put myself in this kind of grind mode about providing, about not failing, about getting it done, about making it happen. And as a result, my self-talk got really hostile. It got really aggressive.
Like what?
I would put the key to my self-actualization and my self-worth on the other side of something that I was aiming for. If you don't get the grant, if you don't get the award, if you don't secure the client, if you don't get the deal, if you don't get into the conference, if you don't do the panel, if you don't do the thing, what was any of this for? And that view is kind of what governed a significant amount of how I operated. And when writing Weirdo, I had to pause. I literally went back to my parents' place. I showed up on Thanksgiving. I said, I'm going to be here till Christmas, but I'm also not here. I'm writing. I went up to my room and I closed the door. I had a whiteboard that I initially wrote the uncommons on when we were starting Weird Enough. And I sat in front of that whiteboard and I scribbled and I put out plot points and I kind of outlined the book, and I had a table where I would sit and I would write. And sitting there with that caused some personal reflection on how far I've grown as a person. And it made me slow down a lot, because when I look at Tony in the book, I'm like, yeah, that's me. And now when I have my self-talk, I talk to myself like I'm talking to him. Like if I wouldn't say it to this version of myself, then I don't say it. Mentally, the way that I communicate with myself and the way that the way that I hold myself accountable or communicate my thoughts is I'm talking to this kid. I'm talking to that version of me. So it's made my like, I guess, the relationship and my inner narrative a lot healthier.
Yeah. I mean, that's essentially, from my field, inner child work, right? And also to a certain degree, I don't know exactly what your relationship was like with your parents, but there's a certain degree of reparenting there as well for your young self, you treating yourself the way that you, at this point, feel like you deserve to be treated.
Yeah, I try to lead with understanding. Like you brought up parenting. For my parents, something that's very interesting is that as soon as I got my advanced reader copies of the book, my parents immediately were like, "Where's mine?" And both of them said, "I'm not sharing it with them." My dad was like, "No, I want mine, not me and your mama's. I want mine." Cool. And my mom was the same way. So and it was big for me because my dad was in a car accident when I was writing Weirdo. He works really, really, really hard hours. He's been working like the night shift basically since he graduated high school. And a lot of that was so that he could provide for the family. And there was a scenario in which he was literally 45 seconds away from home. We live our neighborhood's kind of on a hill, and he fell asleep behind the wheel, and his truck like veered into a ditch, and the truck was totaled. And he walked away with some scratches. And I remember getting that phone call. It was very tension kind of defining thing for me. So I felt good that I could hand him the book, that he was here to see it. Because after I got that call, I think the deep, intense thing was like, there's a chance that he wouldn't have got the opportunity to see it. That was really important to me. So when my parents did read the book, it was very interesting seeing their reactions of this feeling of like, oh, this is true. I remember this. I remember when we used to do this. And then we get to some of the darker parts and they're like, I don't remember that happening. You didn't tell me that they did that to you. I would have done something if you had told me that happened. So even for them, seeing it and them immediately kind of jumping into this, I didn't know that my kid was in the dark like this, type of feeling or moment. And I guess I bring all that up to say that I think people do their best when they can. And as I think about this concept, like you said, of like kind of this inner child work, I try to speak to myself with understanding, even when I'm wrong. Because for my parents, when I was growing up, and for a lot of the authority figures in my life, like, it doesn't matter. The only thing that matters is if it's right or wrong. And if it's right, cool. If it's wrong, I'm upset. I'm frustrated. I'm concerned. I need to discipline you. Some conversation needs to happen. So I started a lot of inner conversations with myself by saying, I understand what you were going for. I see what you were trying. I understand the logic that you were using and how you came to this conclusion. However, the end result is still not what we wanted. And even just that piece of, like, I get what you were attempting. I get what you were trying to do. I see what we were going for. Not
right,
quite.
Good job trying to solve this.
Yeah.
Yeah. The point you bring up about your parents is really interesting in retrospect, where they say, why didn't you tell us? We could have done something. Because there are moments in the book as well where the cousin figure in the book he says, let me help. And there's this sense of, well, that's just going to make things worse. And it is a really hard thing as a young person to, what is a parent going to do? What is a family member going to do? So I feel like you writing this is part of filling in that gap, I think.
Looking back as an adult, I think one thing that we can give children is a healthy understanding of some conflicts are acceptable. Sometimes conflict is acceptable. So when you say, think about the way that we talk to children, the joke that I tell, it's literally in the book. When you're in elementary school and you graduate, they're like, you're the future, you're the leaders of tomorrow, you are going to change our world. And then when you get to middle school, they're like, sit down and shut up. Don't speak. Put your phone away. Don't speak. Be quiet. Stop making all that noise. The moment kids get to middle school, we teach them to, like, smush themselves down, because the system only works if they're silent. Everything only works if they shut up. So when you're kind of surrounded by that system on all sides, especially as like a high achievers kids are like, I expect better from you. I expect you to be up here, even like further beyond where your peers are. You get this feeling of, well, I don't want to rock the boat. And my mom, my mom's a public educator. She's actually chief equity officer now. So she's at the district level now. And my mom, very nice lady, very professional lady, will also flip a table if need be. And when I was a kid, I truly feel like my concern was, I don't want my mom to come up here and flip the table on somebody. But now as an adult, I'm like, you need somebody to come flip the table for you. Do you know how many kids wish that they had a parent that was so active, involved, and cognizant that they would show up and flip a table over something out of bounds and out of pocket that somebody said to their kid? We trick kids sometimes out of their own support systems, because sometimes support requires conflict. You can't treat my child like that. You have no business saying that to my child. And emotions are going to get elevated and voices are going to raise, because something needs to change. Something negative has happened. And there are a lot of kids that we kind of force into compliance through their silence, because we don't want to make a scene. We don't want things to get wild. We don't want things to get crazy. The assistant principal will be mad at me if my mom comes to school and says something about the way that I've been being treated by my teachers, and my teacher will be mad. And then my mom's going to leave and I have to sit in the classroom with this teacher that's upset with me. But you got to sit in that conflict sometimes.
You'll get over that, right? You'll get over that part of it. You won't get over what leads to you eventually taking your life or something like that.
Exactly. Yeah.
I can relate. We have a different set of circumstances. Obviously, if you're watching this, I'm not Black. I'm not from Atlanta, but I grew up poor to a very, very young mom. And so there were certain elements of what you were just talking about at school that resonated, because my mom was the one who would flip a table, right? I remember teachers having to apologize to me in front of class for like not considering me for an award that I was eligible for, or for disciplining me in a certain way. And that was, at that time, embarrassing. But as an adult looking back, it's like, yes, exactly what you should be doing to protect the ones that you love.
Yeah. It's I think you mentioned my cousin in the book. I mean, we're still really close. She just had her first child, which is interesting. I feel he gets a lot. He gets a lot from his uncle. He gets a lot from me. I must say, because he's like one now and he's running around using a bat like a lightsaber. And I'm like, you didn't teach him that. He didn't get that from either. He didn't get that from either of you. That's me. That's me. Okay. He knows what it is. I'm super grateful for her, and the fact that she showed up for me in the way that she did, because ultimately I didn't want anybody to know what was going on. But if she hadn't said something, who knows what would have happened?
Yeah. I appreciate that. That's a good message.
Yeah.
Can we talk a little bit about representation? Because this is something that you obviously within your work, but also outside of your printed work and your webcomic and stuff, you champion a lot. I see, especially lately, a lot of you giving it to people on Instagram about.
Oh, I'll scrap with you.
Yeah, people say, why is there a black samurai? Why is there a black this or that?
That's honestly a great follow-up to our conversation about people accepting conflict. So for me, I'm a positive person. I believe in people. I believe in the world, and I have ideas that I think are borderline utopian that people would say are completely unrealistic. And I think the reason that they're unrealistic is because we don't hold people accountable to them for those things. So for me, positivity is the absence of negativity. And negativity does not go away because someone just decides, oh, I'm going to stop being negative. Sometimes you got to show up and throw hands. Sometimes the only way we get negativity out of spaces is if you throw them out the front door like Uncle Phil used to throw Jazzy Jeff on the Fresh Prince of Bel-Air. Like the only way that things are going to shift or change is if I show up and I look at you square in the face and I go, racism has no place here. You are co-opting a space that was always intended to be for everybody and making it about you because you use it as a security blanket when some girl rejected you when you were 13. And now we all have to pay the consequences for that because you don't want to go get therapy. Ain't no way. we gonna have Black Jedi in every series now, as far as I'm concerned. But to me, representation on a variety of levels, when you look at the data around what representation does for mental health for the young people that are consuming content, I think that's extremely important in a world where students are spending more time engaging with media content than they are in school learning. In any society that cares about its people, you must be paying attention to what these things do. Like maybe 50 years ago, and honestly not even 50 years ago, because George Gerbner was doing the cultural indicators experiment around that time, and he was finding very similarly that these things were impacting stuff. When you look at the doll test, it's not too far off from that time period 50 years ago. These things have always had an impact. But in a time where content is so ubiquitous and we have it on our phones and our tablets and our TV screens, I go to pump gas at the gas station, and while I'm waiting for the gas to pump, a commercial comes on and they're showing like video clips. Content is too ubiquitous and too formative for us to not think about the ramifications of what happens when groups are misrepresented or when groups are underrepresented. You just fundamentally can't. And so many people want to say, well, why do you let yourself be impacted by that stuff? You should know better. You should think better. So many people want to like free thinker their way out of the clearly, thoroughly documented ways that people are influenced by media content. So on one hand, the data just says we need to support it. But on the other hand, I feel like stories with bad representation are poorly written stories. And as a writer, I'm like, you're a hack. You should aspire to be a better writer. There shouldn't be any representation because of wokeness or some conspiracy. There should be representation because it's good writing. If I wrote a story about a forest and I said, hey, my story takes place in this massive forest and you show up and there are no trees, you'd be like, well, that's kind of weird. How does the story take place in a forest if there are no trees? And if the writer was like, well, there weren't a lot of trees where I grew up, so I just wrote what I knew, and I didn't want to make a tree that looked differently than how trees were supposed to look. You'd be like, well, if you were going to write a story about a forest and you didn't know about trees, maybe you shouldn't be writing that story, or maybe you need to go look at some trees and do some research so that things at least feel like mildly realistic. That's how I feel when you place a story in Manhattan and there are no people of color in it. But you place a story in Brooklyn, in Queens, in the Bronx, and Harlem, and there are no people of color in it. When you make a story about jazz and there are no people of color in it, it's like making a story about a forest where there are no trees, or a beach where there's no water. It just, on paper, it doesn't make sense. And there's a very large contingency of people who just don't care about that stuff. They're like, well, I don't see color. I don't pay attention to that stuff. I don't see why you should be focusing on that stuff. I'm like, on paper, it's just bad storytelling. If I wrote a series about robots and there was no electricity, what's powering the robot? How does it work? To me, mentally, my philosophy is that people of all backgrounds, not just black people, people of all backgrounds are what make the world what it is. So when you decide, so for example, I'll go grab it because it's one of my favorites, but it's also like one of the worst offenders.
Go for it.
Let me see.
We can get a nice view of the Pokemon in that.
So when you get a story, like Magi, which is like a high fantasy tale kind of inspired by this kind of like Arabian Nights, Aladdin type aesthetic. This character is named Sinbad. The main character is named, the two main characters are named Aladdin and Alibaba. But if you look, like, this is Alibaba. And I'm like, you can take the gin and the lamps and the architecture and the stories, you can harvest the whole aesthetic. But when it's time for the people to show up, everybody's lily white and pale. That's just bad writing. It's bad writing. And I don't say it in like a disrespectful way. I enjoy this story. I've seen the anime. I have the book. This is where the anime ends. I love it. But simultaneously, it doesn't make sense.
Sure.
On paper, it just doesn't make sense. And I feel like there's a need to express that. You got to put that out there.
That's a really good point. Yeah, I mean, it's like, you live in the desert. You're not going to be all pasty white. That
There's
doesn't
no
make any
way.
sense at all. Yeah, I like that. And yes, it's what you're saying is a good counter to the knee-jerk reaction of like, well, why do you have to shove wokeness down my throat or this or that down my throat? That only comes from the contrast between what the person is already used to, which is zero representation, right? It's this is more close to reality, not further away from reality.
When I tell people in my videos to get therapy, right? Like, people laugh at it sometimes, right? And they're like, yeah, those people really do need therapy. But someone tagged me in a comment. They said, Tony Weaver Jr., I love his videos, but I hate how he treats therapy like a joke. And I responded and I said, oh, no, there's no joke. I'm in therapy every week, every Tuesday at 6:00. I'm in therapy. I'm not telling you to go to therapy as a joke. I mean it. Something needs to be discussed. Because on paper, one of the things where, I don't know, people would get upset with me about this because they're like, what do you mean you relate to? I'm like, I understand the way that these people feel at a base level. People get really upset about wokeness. They're like, this is pandering. And in my head, I'm like, it's heartbreaking that you don't understand that the pandering is what has been happening up until this point. Think about Hollywood and how expensive it is to produce anything in Hollywood, right? Think about how expensive it is to make movies. Women weren't allowed to have their own bank accounts until the 70s. So there are people who had kids in the 70s that are in their 50s right now, and their daughters are the first generation of people that have their own money in their own bank accounts to bankroll film and TV projects. So when Kathleen Kennedy shows up and puts a woman in something, they're like, oh, you're shoving women in everything. I'm like, well, in the history of the medium, right now is one of the earliest opportunities that a woman could be in something. It's not because it's not because, oh, we're shoving women in everything. It's because prior to this, if a woman was in something, go look at the Nickelodeon behind the scenes documentary and see what was going on with the talent that were on set, or the two women that were on staff having one salary split between the two of them because there were no worker protections in place. And that was the only way that they could get a leg up in the industry, because the industry was so hostile that if they said literally anything, they would be canned, and that would just be the end of it. Are you surprised that women are popping up now in things after Me Too? With all these women coming forward talking about the abuse that they experienced for decades in this industry, in this space. And that's before we start talking about the issues that Black female actresses had to deal with, or that Black creators have had to deal with. They're like, wow, you're shoving all these things in here. And I'm like, no, it's the opposite. The pandering is what's been going on since the beginning of this century, when conceptually cowboys were literally a slur that was used to describe Black farmhands. And when they decided they wanted to make movies about it, they figured, oh, a Black actor wouldn't sell. Nobody's going to go see that. So we're going to shift it and we're going to change it. That's pandering. The pandering is what created this kind of homogenous ecosystem of film and TV in the first place. So now when we attempt to move that or shift that, oh, it's pandering, oh, it's woke, oh, you're forcing it down my throat. No, the thing that was forced was the stories when none of these people were here. That's what was forced. We're on the other side of that now. And people don't like it. And I try my best not to vilify people, right? Like some people are just legitimately racist. Like, it is what it is.
Sure.
Some people are just some people are just discriminatory. But I try not to take this point of view that everybody that disagrees with me or everybody that feels iffy about a Black character being in a certain IP is just this irredeemably bad person. But I do feel like they need therapy, because your entire view of the world and your value system is based on the output of a group of executives that were pandering to you this whole time. And having that kind of snatched from you like a baby's binky, of course you're going to start crying. But we got to move forward. We can't hold back on progress just because you feel some type of way.
That echoes to me the way you were talking about how you talk to yourself, which is, the person that you're imagining here. You're not saying you're horrible by nature. You're saying, I see where you're getting this programming from. Also, that's not reality, and you might want to work on that.
It's I just feel like it's work that everybody has to do. One thing that I say is, like, as a Black man, I grew up in a culture where I was taught that my value as a person was linked to the amount of women that I had been with. That is what I was taught. It's like whenever somebody goes to make fun of you, what they say is like, oh, you don't get no girls want you. So from a young age, you're conditioned to believe that, well, if the girls want me and I'm desirable by women, then that means I'm a good person. So I need to be desirable, which is why you see so many men freak out when they get rejected by somebody, because it's not just, no, I don't want to talk to you, or no, I don't want to date you. It's a wide scale rejection of that person's humanity. And they feel that and have no means to process that or talk about that. They feel that weakness. They feel exposed. We're told that men aren't supposed to feel that way, and they get violent. On paper, the math all checks out to me. So those are things that I'm trying to break down. Those are things that have to be let go. And when I see people that I think need to let go of some of those racist tendencies, in the back of my head, I'm like, I can't fully condemn you, because there are things that I was taught when I grew up that I had to unlearn, that I had to let go of. I think we all have things that we have to work through and process in order to become better people. But unfortunately, you can kind of coast through life without having to do any of that inner work if you try hard enough. But when everything starts popping up on TV, you can't really run from it anymore. You kind of have to do the work, and people get upset about that.
Yeah. and you're also out here on the soft side putting out content that is important, and on the a little bit harder side flipping some tables when you need to on Instagram.
Yeah.
I could talk to you for another 3 hours about this stuff, but we need to be respectful of your time and such. Can you tell people right now, so the book is coming out soon, right? Weirdo's coming out soon. Okay. And so if they want to follow along and, grab this, or is it available for pre-order right now?
Weirdo is available for pre-order everywhere. Barnes & Noble, Amazon, Target, your local bookstore, your comic book shop. It should be up for solicitations there if you want to pre-order it there. Bookshop, where you can kind of find a local bookstore in your area. It is available for pre-order everywhere. Pre-orders are especially important for debut authors such as myself, because it kind of sets the tone for how much stock a store is going to order. So it's my job to drive pre-orders and get people engaged, with pre-orders, so that it'll be in the store for that kid that needs it, that's not necessarily in my in my realm right now, that's not seeing my content, whose parents don't necessarily know who I am. Getting
Who should be picking this up? Who should be picking up the book?
This is terrible to say. I feel like everybody. I feel like if you're a parent and you have a kid and you're concerned about like what is going on in the world, how do I have conversations with my child about any of this stuff? How do I make sure that they're okay? They kept begging me for a phone, and I gave them that phone, and I got the little safety apps on it, so I know what they're downloading and what they're not downloading, but I don't know if they're ready. Weirdo is the book to go grab and read with that kid. If there's a young person in your life that's different, that's quirky, that's unique, and in your heart of hearts, you feel like as they grow up, they might lose that. You see them kind of running around with their action figure, and you're like, how long are they going to get to keep this? Weirdo is the book for that kid. And I would also say, if you have a kid that has everything good going for them, like if you have a kid that like popular, captain of the cheerleading squad or basketball team, Weirdo is the book that they need to read, because even though they might not be struggling with fitting in, it'll kind of awaken them to the power that they have to create space for other kids that might be struggling in that way. And I think that work and that mindset is something that every person should have. How can I make space for others?
Beautiful. Yeah. Awesome, Tony. Well, where would you like people to follow up with you, to follow along? Give me some things to shout out for you, and then we can let you get to your next interview that you have in a few minutes.
Well, I'm at Tony Weaver Jr. on all platforms. And I mean, you can find me on Instagram, on TikTok. Those are primarily the places where I hang out. And I'm just talking. I'm yapping. I'm talking about self-love, talking about representation, talking about fandom and how it can be used as a positive force to move the world forward. And I've been told that I have some good outfits sometimes. That's what the comments say. That's what they tell me. I've been told I have some good outfits sometimes. If
you're listening on audio, you'll have to come check out the YouTube as well, because yes, that is on full display right now.
I'm trying.
Awesome. Thank you, Tony.
Thank you.